Okay, so I'm trying to think about Real Housewives of Atlanta because I really wanted to recap, but I really just want to say something. And this is just like a very message. I really hated that Nene slut shamed Cynthia's daughter, or implied that having female assigned children means something about the level of parenting that needs to be instilled. It just seemed very fucking like, just like femphobic as fuck, and just like very just like just not at all like understanding of like people's like familial structures, you know? Like I remember Nene saying like things worked for them in their household or whatever. They're like, it's whatever works for your household. But it doesn't seem like that's the case for Nene. It seems like whatever works in other people's households is up for scrutiny by Nene because Nene is running the household that's the most tightest, the most together. And I don't want to, shame them in any way, but I think like if we're talking about our children being on the right track, or our children what the fuck ever, we have to like be real about the fact that like she has had problems with her children in the media, and I've never heard of Noelle getting any fucking beef. So I'm just sitting here like, Nene, let us not speak if on those who are really just trying to like, figure it out for themselves. I think like Cynthia realizes that telling Noelle, no, you can't have a boyfriend, when she already has a boyfriend, puts a limit on her in a very clear and defining way. It's, I don't think that it's appropriate for people to be asking permission, whether asking permission to have relationships for other people. I feel like that's just like not the business. And I realize that some people are going to say that's some progressive shit, but I feel like if we're progressing towards a more fucking communicative, understanding and healing kind of nuclear unit, or just like structure of folks like trying to like come together and like really be a part of each other's lives, I feel like that's a positive thing. I feel like if we're really trying to listen to our youth and understand what they need and what where they're coming from, we might be in a better place instead of imposing very strict and very seemingly needless, you know, paths for them to walk in. I understand that like, Noelle saying that she has a boyfriend might seem defiant to some folks, but I feel like if you establish in your household, which obviously Cynthia didn't, that it's a problem for them to have those relationships and they do that, then like that's defiance. But I feel like in some ways, there are people out there that think that children are like wild weeds or something, like just need to be whipped into shape, just need to be cultivated and brought up a certain way. And while I think it's important to have a nurturing and open dialogue, it does involve like letting that person like experience life for real, and not under like these arbitrary guidelines, this faux respectability and conservative fucking idea of like what it means to be a 13-year-old child, adolescent, whatever being. I think it's just I think it's unfortunate, because I feel like I really love, Nene's character on the show, or whatever the fuck they be doing on the show. It's interesting, but I feel like in a lot of ways, like they are very misogynistic, and they definitely come from a place, that's kind of scary to me, as a person who's really trying to heal. I feel like when you want to heal and you see harm being done to other folks, it can be very traumatizing and it can be very hurtful, especially if you identify with the person who is being abused. And I do identify with Cynthia. I feel like if I were to have a child who was female assigned and they were telling me that they were dating someone, I feel like, if for that to be news to me means that, maybe we're not connecting as often. But then again, we have to remember this is a scripted show. So even if it did catch Cynthia off guard, as Cynthia said, we have to be real about like what the fuck wouldn't catch us off guard about like our children, especially, think about like the generational behavior, in terms of like folks. I think like me, when I was growing up, I know for sure like my family would have flipped out if I would have talked about having a boyfriend or something, or like not flipped out, but would have like made it a big deal, tried to embarrass me or something like that. But they wouldn't have been like positive, and that's unfortunate. I think like a lot of like I think a lot of female assigned folks definitely came out in the paint and said, you know, I would have appreciated my mom, or my parent, talking to me and telling me, that they were interested in hearing about my fucking life and like wanting to know more about what I brought to them. And I feel like in some ways, yeah, like the relationship does seem like friends, but I feel like there's nothing wrong with trying to be your child's friend. I feel like friendship can be part of the relationship you cultivate with your child, but I feel like there has to be boundaries. And I feel like that's real. Like, I feel like there are things that, like, as a responsible, adult, there are things that, like, obviously you don't introduce your child to, or you don't, like, quote unquote, let them do. But I think when it comes to, like, them going out and having relationships outside of my home, having relationships that involve me or do not involve me, I feel like that's a reality. And I feel like that's also part of them becoming an adult, quote unquote, because, like, I think, like, I try to, like, think outside of, like, the binary of, like, adult, child, and try to break down those power dynamics, because I feel like it's so much bigger than that. I feel like it implicates, like, sizeism, it implicates ability, and able-bodiedness, and I feel like in a lot of ways, like, we have to really just, like, reapproach, like, how we have communications with people in general, and stop trying to force, like, these traditional markers of what these people mean to us as, like, having less or no impact on our energy and having less or no impact in their lives, period. Like, we can't say, oh, this is my so-and-so, and expect that title alone to mean that, like, all of these emotions come out. I feel like, just because you're somebody's parent doesn't mean that, like, that person is going to consider you 100% of the time, and you really have to, like, get over that shit, like, when I'm out here doing me, like, am I sitting here thinking about the person that birthed me? Not at all. Am I thinking about the people all the time that, like, are in my nuclear family when I do things? Not at all. And I think that, like, it's also important, from the child perspective, in ways to look at, the adult, quote unquote, the adult, as another being just like yourself, just like you don't have all the answers, just like things can seem very impossible and complicated. It's the same for adult folks. So I think that there needs to also be a level of understanding, not to say that we're going to condone abuse, or not to say we're going to, turn a blind eye to things, but I think that it's also important, because I feel in some ways, like, I saw my mother as my mother. I didn't see her as a person, and I think that that's really fucked up, because, like, when you see somebody as a person, that's when you can really understand more than be angry. And I understand that being angry at my mother for certain things is important, but also being understanding is important too, because it allows me to heal myself and heal the ways in which I am like her, or I too have things that are not positive that I am doing, or making me happy, or things that I do that aren't really, things that I want to be doing, things that I might have done that, I regret. I have to be mindful of the ways that I want to move forward, and, kind of feel like I can be washed clean, and really have a new handle on things, that she wants that as well. And I think that it's important to, remind myself of those things. But, I really don't want to go into the whole Real Housewives of Atlanta, but it just really made me sad that, like, Nene shamed Cynthia. And I feel like Cynthia's crying was mad real, because it's just like, damn, like, slut-shaming is mad fucking real out here. Like, people will fucking shame young female assigned at birth folks for just fucking doing anything. Like, I remember I saw a Vine, there was, like, this young, like, black child who was, like, doing a dance that was very similar to, like, twerking, and there were, like, these white dudes who were, like, holding up money, like, next to that person, trying to, like, this is a child, they're sexualizing a young black child who is doing a dance that they're mimicking, that they're seeing someone do in front of them on the basketball court. So it just, like, really freaks me out, like, how, like, how pervasive messages are, like, in terms of, like, people seeing things and mimicking them, and, like, not really taking time to, like, really, like, analyze why they're doing what they're doing, but also analyzing why the fuck they would sexualize a child, why the fuck they would look at this child doing something and immediately perceive it as one way, and not at all, like, try to figure out why the fuck they would do that, or try to pause and, like, really, analyze that, and really challenge that thought, and even challenge that action, challenging a lot of things along the way. So I think that that's like a big part of um, rape culture is the slut shaming, is the degrading of female assigned at birth folks, um, making people who have been female assigned at birth feel like what they do is 100% implicating what happens to them. You twerk, you get hurt. That's your fault, you know? Putting the onus of blame on the victim 100% because of the victim's uh, implied gender. And noting that like female assigned at birth folks have like less worthiness, depending on their presentation, depending on how beautiful they are, how able-bodied they are, like so many layers, you know, how thin they are, how cis they are, and it's just very extreme sometimes to really watch things like that play out on a casual ass fucking Sunday evening, you know, when I'm watching a show and they're talking about these girls twerking at the mall, as if that means anything, as if twerking at the wall means that's why you have a grandchild out of wedlock with your younger son, you know what I mean, or with your oldest son, you know what I mean, and not to shame that child, not to shame that action, but, you know, correlating twerking at the club with promiscuous behavior leading to ... pregnancy ... you know, Noelle being pregnant. Like that's all I was really hearing at the table was them like continuing to reference pregnancy, as if one, being pregnant would be a bad thing, and two, being pregnant out of wedlock would be a bad thing, or being pregnant by some random person would be a bad thing, when in reality, like, the grandchild that you're holding is pregnant by this random person that is not on the show. We've never been introduced to. You'd think we would be if things are going quote unquote traditionally like Nene wants things to be in this like June Cleaver-esque way. But it's just not the case. And again, I don't want to shame anybody because I think that it's just like interesting how respectability politics works in a certain way. And also how people can really analyze other folks' lives and situations while having their own shit on fire. You know what I mean? Like, it's just very interesting. Where agency lies. But I just thought it was really interesting, a bunch of black women sitting around and they really could only like see for their own selves and really talk for their own selves. And I just feel like, damn, Candy, where were you? You know what I mean? It's like you wrote no scrubs. You know, people love to talk about how they're feminists, or how they're writing feminist anthems, or how they're out here for black women, or they're out here for women, period, and za. But like when we're sitting down, when we're having dinner, when we're talking with our friends, and we say things like, oh, I'm so happy I have little boys because I don't want to have to deal with pregnancy, when, again, only ain't shit motherfuckers don't take care of their kids. You feel me? So it's like really like you talking about you so happy that you got boys so you don't got to deal with pregnancy. It's like, what kind of bums are y'all raising? You know what I mean? What kind of bums are y'all raising that you really think having a male assigned at birth child means that you'll never have to deal with pregnancy? It's just very fucking polarizing and very disgusting, and just makes you I feel like that's what scares so many female assigned at birth folks, especially myself. I was very afraid of getting pregnant and becoming a quote-unquote statistic, and that fear was put into me by my uncle, who like really tried to like fortune tell on my life and talk about how my life was gonna be. And I feel like for a long time I was really like worried to like have sex, worried to share my body with someone else, and it really made me feel like my body was not my own, that my body was like, you know, just like on this road, you know, going wherever the fuck, and I really had no control. It just made me feel very much alienated from myself and who I really was, and like what I really wanted to do with my body and who I wanted to share it with. So, you know, we have to be mindful about shaming folks. We have to be mindful about saying things like that, because it gets in people's minds and they start to believe that shit. They start to resound that shit in their mind that, you know, if they twerk at the club and they get pregnant, that they deserve bad treatment, that they deserve to be left alone. It's just all of this, all of these things are just very, they're femphobic as fuck, and they're full of misogynoir, which is like the racialized degradation and hate on black women specifically, and it's real, you know. And I just feel like I was just disgusted, because I feel like Cynthia was crying because, like, y'all talking about her fucking daughter, you know what I mean? Like, I think that's what it is. Like, y'all are talking about her child, and, you know, that really hurt. And I feel like it will hurt all of us to hear our friends with with male assigned at birth children, saying that like pregnancy falls on you, your child is the wrong one, like you're like you carrying the wrong, like you got the wrong type of child, you got a female child, and ain't no good can come from that, and just slut shaming like a mug, and it was just making me really depressed and really sick. But I'm happy I got to get this off my chest because I really was feeling it. But thank y'all for listening. I appreciate y'all. We're gonna talk soon, and hopefully it'll be a beautiful time. Permission, whether asking permission to have relationships with other people, I feel like that's just like not the business. And I realize that some people are going to say that's some progressive shit, but I feel like if we're progressing towards a more fucking communicative, understanding, and healing kind of nuclear unit, or just like structure of folks like trying to like come together and like really be a part of each other's lives, I feel like that's a positive thing. I feel like if we're really trying to listen to our youth and understand what they need and where they're coming from, we might be in a better place, instead of imposing very strict and very seemingly needless paths for them to walk in. I understand that, like, Noelle saying that she has a boyfriend might seem defiant to some folks, but I feel like if you establish in your household, which obviously Cynthia didn't, that it's a problem for them to have those relationships, and they do that, then like that's defiance. But I feel like in some ways, there are people out there that think that children are like wild weeds or something, like just need to be whipped into shape, just not at all like understanding of like people's like familial structures. Like I remember Nene saying like things worked for them in their household or whatever. They were like, it's whatever works for your household. But it doesn't seem like that's the case for Nene. It seems like whatever works in other people's households is up for scrutiny by Nene, because Nene's running the household that's the most tightest, the most together. And I don't want to shame them in any way, but I think like if we're talking about our children being on the right track, or our children what the fuck ever, we have to like be real about the fact that like she has had problems with her children in the media, and I've never heard of Noelle getting any fucking beef. So I'm just sitting here like, Nene, let us not speaketh on those who are really just trying to like, figure it out for themselves. I think like Cynthia realizes that telling Noelle, no, you can't have a boyfriend, when she already has a boyfriend, puts a limit on her in a very clear and defining way. I don't think that it's appropriate for people to be asking. Okay, so I'm trying to think about Real Housewives of Atlanta, because I really wanted to recap, but I really just wanted to say something, and this is just like a very message. I really hated that Nene slut-shamed Cynthia's daughter, or implied that having female assigned children means something about the level of parenting that needs to be instilled. It just seemed very fucking like, just like femphobic as fuck, and just like very just like